Hello, everyone. My name is Mariana, and I'm an educator at the Natural History Museum of Utah. Welcome to our question and answer session that I'll be leading today. Today, we're going to speak with Austin Green. He's a PhD candidate for the University of Utah. Hello, Austin. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me back.
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here. And for everyone, if you want to ask a question, please just press the ask a question button or leave a comment on Facebook because they're also going to read your questions there. Let me present you. Austin, he studies how human influence affects mammal distribution and behavior, and he wants to apply this knowledge to wildlife conservation. So I want to start this really interesting interview thanking you and asking you to talk a little bit more about like your work and your research to us.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for having me. Hello, everybody. So I study specifically mammals and really how humans and mammals interact. And so we've put together a project called Wasatch Wildlife Watch, where community scientists, so that's basically any member from the community that's interested in participating in science, they get together and they set up a bunch of camera traps. And these camera traps are remote sensing cameras. And so they go out into the field, wherever you want to set them up, and they sense both motion and heat. And every time that they sense that, they'll take a photo, and you can then use those photos as data points. And so you can use those photos to really get some good information about where animals are, what type of the day they're active, and how they use certain landscapes. And when you overlay that information with how humans are using the landscape, you can get a really good idea of how these two, wildlife and humans, they're not necessarily separate, but they do interact in a little bit different ways. You can get a really good idea of how they're actually interacting using these camera traps. And so that's what we've been doing for the past 3 years or so. And it's been a fantastic experience. The best part is working with all the different people, but then really seeing some of those great photographs come in and some of that really great data come in. That's also really something that we're always excited to see.
That's awesome. That's so interesting. And like, I got some questions about the camera trap thing because this process, because today we talked about this, like Andy was talking about this really like in a great class this morning. And he talked about that we are going to talk to you about this topic today. So I got some questions about the cameras. So awesome. Would you like to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, it'd be great to talk more about the cameras. Unfortunately, I don't have a camera with me. I'm at my home today instead of in the office. But yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit more about the cameras and what they do and how they work and stuff. And so really, when you talk about a camera trap or when you're using a camera trap, it's basically the exact same way you would operate any other type of camera. They have a lens, they do all the good stuff. They store all their photos on SD cards. And this is exactly how our cameras work as well, except instead of having to be there to actually take the photo, these cameras are able to take photos by themselves. They're able to take them based on any type of movement or any type of settings that you want to set. And so it makes it really great for us to study species that otherwise wouldn't be able to be studied. And particularly, we really look at species that are active at night and species that are really elusive. Because if you just go out into, let's say the Wasatch, but if you go out into the wild or any of your natural areas, the animals that you're typically going to see are ones that are active during the day. So you're going to see insects, you're going to see, fish, you might see a few reptiles, you're going to see lots of birds, but you aren't going to see as many mammals. And that's because they're nocturnal, they're really elusive, and they're just not as in tune with hanging out with humans as a lot of these other species are. And so because of that, it's really difficult to study them. But because they're so important, they occupy such high levels of a food web, what happens to them can really trickle down to the rest of the ecosystem. And so you want to be able to study them. And so cameras allow you to be able to do that because they are active when those mammals are active. And so, we get a lot of photos at night, we get a lot of photos at those wee hours of the day. And that's really when they're super active and when it's best to get that information. And it's really difficult without using camera traps. If you just try to go out there and count them yourselves, you're going to have a really hard time of seeing just about anything.
Yeah, that seems like really, really useful. And would you like to share with us like maybe some of like the mammals or like some of the birds or reptiles, like some
Yeah.
examples just to so like our like students at home they can like relate to like they probably know some of them. So
Yeah, of course. And so let me try to share my screen here.
awesome.
All right, you see that?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, that's
perfect.
so
And
cool.
so I'm partial. I've studied large carnivores my entire life, and so I'm partial to large carnivores. This is probably my favorite large carnivore ever. This is a mountain lion or a puma. They have a bunch of different names actually, but these are some of my favorite photos. So this one is from 2018. This is up in a research natural area in Utah. So this is actually off limits to the public. And this area is really important for a lot of animals in Utah. And this is just one of those really great photos that we've gotten from these cameras of a mountain lion just hanging out in the sun. This is another one of my favorite photos. This was back in
Oh,
2016, another mountain lion. You're going to get a lot of mountain lion photos because, like I said, those are my favorite. But this is one of my all-time favorites. I really love this photo, especially because it's actually looking at the camera. It's almost like it was posing for us.
yeah, it's so
Um,
beautiful.
and then we got this other great photo of a mountain lion as well, walking along the trail. So I've always been huge fans of these photos. This is one of my favorite reasons for using camera traps. Like I said, I've studied large carnivores my entire life. I've lived in the Wasatch my entire life. I've seen 2 of these in the wild. And with these camera traps, we have well over 200, nearly 300 photos of them. Here's some of the other
Wow.
ones. These are actually from our website, and so you can go and check these out if you're interested. This is from the past year. This is a pregnant female that's actually
Oh,
walking down a hiking trail in the Wasatch Mountains. So this is one of my all-time favorite photos. We also see her and her kitten a couple weeks later. So she gives birth to her kitten, which is fantastic.
oh, that's so cool.
This is a little more gross. This is a coyote. We barely got this photo. Sometimes you do get the weird and the gross photos, unfortunately. But this one's got a severed deer head, so that's kind of a strange one. And then we get some of the cuter photos too, where we get mom and baby hanging out in the
Oh,
chase. And so we get lots of really awesome photos. If you're interested in checking out any of the other cool photos that we have, we do have a website. It's called
mm-hmm.
Wasatch Wildlife Watch. And if you go through here, you can actually access all of our data as well as all of our photos. But you can click
Awesome.
right here and you can view all of the great photos from the project. And it's continuously updated as more photos are uploaded. And so if you checked it out once and there wasn't as many as you thought, you can go back. There's plenty of them now. And if you want more information on the project, this is a great resource, but you can also just search Wasatch Wildlife Watch in general. And the first page that will come up is this one right here, which will just give you some information about the project. I'm not sure if you can see this,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah,
this
we
is just,
can.
oh, great. So this is just information on the project, a little more info. It really goes in depth if you check out this YouTube video. It's our entire training, actually. You can get updates on our project. This is all put together by Wild Utah Project. It's an awesome organization that if you're in Utah, based in Utah, looking for projects to get involved with, I highly recommend looking into them. They're a fantastic organization. And even through this, you can even sign up to participate through this website as well. So if you click here, you can sign up to actually sort through those photos yourself. So if you want to be the first one to look through the photos from 2020, you can sign up to do so right here. And you'll be the first one to look through and identify those photos. All right, so let me get out of this.
That's
Okay.
awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And so before you continue, I just want to remind everyone who's watching, if you want to leave a question for Austin, please just press the ask a question button or leave a comment on Facebook, okay? Another question like now related to like the camera part was like, what are some challenges of like the camera trap part? Because I can imagine that there are probably some challenges.
Yeah, there can be some challenges. And so you really have to focus on training when you set up a camera trapping project, because it seems fairly simple, and they are fairly simple to set up cameras out in the wild. But if you don't do it to a certain protocol or to a certain degree, you can really get some issues that come up. And one of those biggest issues are that these cameras are super sensitive. They do a great job of detecting wildlife, But because they're super sensitive, they do a really great job of detecting flowing vegetation and wind and sunlight, and so if you don't follow kind of the proper training measures, you can end up really having a camera that in the span of a couple of weeks or so takes 30 or 40,000 photos. And when you have all of those photos, it can be really difficult to sort through them. And so that's always the biggest challenge, is getting through all the photos. We get so much data, we get so many photos that we really just need a ton of help doing it. And so that's why we love when people sign up, when people really want to look through these photos, because that helps us take those photos and take them into data and then use that data to really get any type of conservation management strategies out there.
That's awesome, and that really connects to one of the questions that I got here from Utah. Anna is asking, how can folks get involved in from like a computer? Like, how can they get involved in your project? So, like besides like going through the pictures, do you have like any other things that people can get involved in this project?
Yeah, for sure. And so there's multiple ways. The largest way, if you want to do work from a computer, is to look through photos. And so, like I said, if you sign up to be a registered volunteer, you're going to be the first one to look through the photos from our project. But really, if you want to just be someone that doesn't necessarily want to register as an actual like volunteer and have photos assigned to them, you can access a lot of different projects and a lot of different data using a program called Zooniverse. And so if it's okay with you, I do have Zooniverse pulled up right now, and I can
Yeah.
share my screen.
Sure. Yeah, we'd love to.
Awesome. And
Thank you.
so what Zooniverse is basically just this database of all these different scientific projects that are looking for help. And specifically, they're looking for help from people that want to help from a computer or an iPad or even a cell phone. And so what they've done is they've created a project, or they've created a page that has all their projects on there, and all their data is uploaded to those pages. And all you have to do is click on a project that you're interested in and start looking through and helping out with that project. And so I went ahead and started one. This is Snapshot Bluebird, or it's basically part of the Snapshot Safari project. This is a really big camera trapping project in Africa. It almost spans the entire continent at this point. It was all started by one research group, and then they have a bunch of different areas that they focus on. And all you have to do to sign up, that doesn't require any registration. All you have to do is just click into the project and you get started right away. And, and so it'll give you a quick tutorial of how to look through all the photos and stuff, and how to go through all of that manual. But then it's just looking at amazing photos from areas in Africa or areas wherever you're interested in, and classifying what you see in those images. And so right here, you'd see a bunch of impala walking through. But let's say you didn't know that they were impala. You could say, oh, well, it looks like something like this, or it has a pattern that looks something like this. And so it has all these really nice ways for you to interact with the images themselves and really kind of narrow down what you're looking for. And then once you have an idea of what you're looking for, you can say, okay, maybe it's a baboon or something. You're like, oh, maybe not, because here's a couple photos of them. Here's what they're often confused with. Anyway, and so you can go through, and every single classification you make is another data point for that project, so that they can use that information and really start making an impact on the ground. And our project is also on Zooniverse. So if you want to specifically look at animals from the Wasatch, there's a project on Zooniverse called Wasatch Wildlife Watch, and you can check it out. But really, that's the main thing. If you want to get involved from a computer, you can do as much as you want. You can do data analysis, you can do data entry, or you can do what a lot of these people are doing and look through actual photos from a bunch of different projects.
Yeah, that's awesome. So like if anyone like who's watching is interested, like it's also a good way to learn about these animals and like see some really cool pictures. So yeah, if anyone is interested, that'd be awesome. I have another question here, a really good question. Oliver from Washington is asking, how are you hoping your research will impact the Wasatch Front? That's a really good question.
That is an awesome question. And so a little bit of background to this question: the Wasatch Front is a really amazing area. We actually see roughly 9 million visitors every single year. And that's equal to all 5 of our major national parks in Utah combined. And so because of that, and then if you add on to that as well, that Utah has the fastest growing population in the entire United States, this traffic is expected to increase, and it's already at a high level. And because of that, we can take that high level of human influence, or hiking traffic, or housing development, you name it, and we can relate that to how wildlife are interacting with those different human influences. And we can not only say, okay, this is working, this might not be working. Based on our data, these are the most important areas that we should focus on for protecting this ecosystem moving forward. And so we can not only look at that on the local scale and say, how can we protect our ecosystems in the Wasatch Mountains, but we can take the information that we're getting just generally from how wildlife are interacting with humans, and we can then kind of extrapolate that to other areas. So as other areas start getting the same amount of traffic that the Wasatch is experiencing, and other areas start seeing these really high increases of population growth, we can say, okay, based on what we've learned in Utah, we can expect to see this, this, and this happening in these ecosystems. And before any issues come up, we can address them with specific policies and plans to make sure that both humans and wildlife are protected going into the future.
That's awesome. It's really good, really important. And I would have like a question related to that. That would be like, can you share with us like maybe some results like of your research, because you're researching like how human influence is like impacting animals like behavior and location. So do you have any examples maybe to show like of like any one of those like location or behavior that you would like to share?
Yeah, for sure. And so one of the biggest results that's coming out of this project is really just highlighting where animals are most focused along the landscape. And when you do that analysis, you really start to see that these small protected areas are hot spots for animals in any type of ecosystem. And if it's maintained correctly, a really small hotspot can serve to protect the entirety of a much larger ecosystem. But what we're seeing in Utah is that our hotspots are concentrated north of a major interstate highway. And so the areas north of this highway have a really good wildlife community. There's lots of activity, but the areas directly south of this interstate see drastically lower levels of activity, different species, kind of across the board. Oh, sorry, my cat. Across the board, we're seeing decreases in all these different metrics based on just the presence or absence of an interstate highway. And so that's one of the major things we're seeing. We're also seeing that domestic cats have always been known to have a major negative effect on birds, right? If you let your cat go outside, unfortunately, it does end up killing a lot of birds or small mammals. Anywhere up to 10 to 25 billion animals a year just in the United States alone. And so that was kind of thought to be the extent of the effect of domestic cats. But what we're seeing is that domestic cats might also have a competitive effect on mesopredators or smaller predators like raccoon, skunk, bobcat, coyote. Where these domestic cats are going, they're occupying and utilizing the same resources as these other wild animals, and actually leading to decreases in these wild animals as well. And so domestic cats are actually something that we're really looking into. But those are really two of the main results that we've come through. We're looking at a bunch of different questions now, trying to really get an idea of exactly how these different wild animals are using this landscape. But the project's still new, and so we still have tons and tons of data coming in. So stay tuned.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're going to do that. And so before we continue, I just want to remind everyone who's watching to, like, if you want to leave a question for Austin, please press that ask a question button or leave a question on Facebook as well. So I have some here. I have Sarah in Virginia is asking, so if I wanted to become a wildlife biologist, what would you recommend I know beforehand? That's a good question. I think
that's a very good question. And so there's always, science classes are always important, but really one of the main things is to remain curious and to basically be brave enough to try things that you don't think you'd actually be wanting to do or willing to do. When I started wildlife biology, I thought it was going to be a lot of hiking. I thought it was going to be a lot of outdoor stuff, interacting with wildlife. And you get a ton of that. And so having that scientific knowledge, knowing all of that, that's really important. But then when the field season's over, you've got to learn how to write, and you've got to learn how to work on the computer a lot. And so, just don't shy away from things you might not be able to do. I actually didn't even have an email address until I was in college. And so I really was about as novice with computer as it gets. And I had to teach myself a lot of how to use computers, how to handle spreadsheets, how to code different analysis. I had to teach myself that, and I could have shied away from it, and I could have said, I don't want to do that. But then I would have closed a lot of doors for me. So if you're really interested in biology, be open to trying things that you otherwise don't think you might be able to do.
Yeah, I think yesterday we were interviewing also someone like who's doing a PhD, and she was talking about like how learning like different subjects, you have to learn so many different things. So like, yeah, being a scientist like means like learning a lot, like not only your interest subject. That's really awesome. I have a question from Baltimore. Caleb is he's asking, how can I help my local wildlife? I think that's a really important question.
So that's awesome. Yeah. And really, it spans the gauntlet here. So you can go anywhere from planting native species in your garden, to making sure that, you can even have your own backyard designated as a protected wildlife area, depending on what type of species you plant, because really it all starts from the ground up. And so the vegetation that's present leads to the smaller invertebrates that are present, and then that leads to the animals that eat them. And so that's one major thing you can do, is just simply create a garden, or have, native species, set up a bird feeder. Don't keep your backyard clean, don't litter. Take out, when you take out the trash, make sure it all gets into the trash. Recycle, reuse, all of that stuff. Those are things you can do right now. The small steps at home, but then also participate in all these different community science projects that are going on. Anywhere you look, you can look, online, or even at your local zoos, natural history museums, aquariums. There are projects going on all over the place, and they're just looking for people to help with them. And so if you're interested in plants, you can use iNaturalist, or you can work with a researcher from, a university. If you're interested in birds, there's tons of different bird projects that are going on, fish, mammals, you name it. If you are interested, there's some really great resources, and we can talk about some of those resources as well. But, your zoos, your aquariums, your natural history museums, your research universities, if you have any really cool nonprofit organizations around, like Wild Utah Project here in Utah, these are some of these great organizations. They're doing the work on the ground. They're looking for as much help as they can. And so you just need to basically try and find them. If you try and find them, they're there for you.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a lot of examples. Thank you. We have a question related to another answer you gave, like Laura from Salt Lake City. She's asking, you were talking about how cats are competing with coyotes and skunks. I thought they were pests. Pests. Are they important? Are cats or coyotes more important?
So that's a really good question. And so, cats and coyotes, if I said coyotes, I misspoke a little bit. Coyotes are a little bit bigger. They eat a little bit different on the food chain than cats do. So they're not as negatively affected by cats. But that is a great question just in general about whether or not coyotes are pests. And it really kind of depends on who you talk to and who you ask. There's really good information on both sides. And so, for naturalists and for wildlife enthusiasts, they might be more inclined to say that coyotes are important because since we don't have wolves on our ecosystems anymore, they occupy an important area in our food web because they're predators, and so they're eating these animals. And this has a really positive effect in general on an ecosystem. But then on the flip side, they are known to attack pets and attack a bunch of other animals and really can kind of cause havoc. And so it really just depends on who you ask. And it's really kind of just trying to find that middle ground. Where can you establish a healthy population of coyote that isn't negatively affecting human beings. And, this is kind of seen all over the world with a bunch of different species. Coyotes are just one example of all of these different species. But really, that's a great question. And as far as which one's more important, cats or coyotes, that's always really hard to say. I love them both equally. I think they both have a place. And so I, can't say one way or another which one would be more important. But I do think that if you have a domestic cat, one of the best things you can do, to getting back to an earlier question, to improve your local ecosystem is to actually just keep them indoors. Cats love to be outside. A lot of the times they like to go outside, but keeping your cat indoors is the best thing if possible. And if you can't keep them indoors, putting bells on their collar or some way to make it so that they are less effective natural predators, because they are built to hunt and they will hunt whether they're fed or not. And so, making sure that you make it so that it's as hard as possible for them to do so, that might be one of the most important things you can do right now to help your local wildlife.
Yeah, thank you. And I have another question kind of related to that from Inca, Salt Lake City. He's asking, how can you notice like that this changes in the wildlife, they are impacting humans? Like how like this effects like in the ecosystem are affecting humans?
That's a really good question. And honestly, it's difficult to know until it happens. And that's why, it's always kind of dangerous to play with this type of game, because we see a lot of what can happen to an ecosystem when it's degraded, but usually that's after the fact. And so we'll see like in upstate New York, when their ecosystems got fairly degraded, they saw that ultimately affected the water quality in New York City. And so then what they did is established a restoration program, and now they have some of the cleanest water that goes through absolutely no filtration system at all. And so that is difficult to say. What we try to do as wildlife biologists is say this is how the wildlife are being affected. But then as far as how that effect will, and ultimately affect humans, we have some information on what's happened in the past, but every ecosystem is different, and everyone has to kind of be treated as its own system or its own, monster in itself. And so because of that, it can be really difficult to say, well, if coyote populations are declining or cougar populations are declining, that's going to have so or so on effect on species. You can make estimates, you can make guesses based on evidence, but at the end of the day, you need a lot of different people working together in a lot of different fields. So you need the wildlife biologists working with the botanists, working with the water quality managers, working with engineers and urban planners. And if everyone's together working on a multi-collaborative project, then you can have a more full picture of exactly what's going on.
Yeah, thank you. And I have a question because you were showing the pictures before. So I have a question from Justice. She's from North Carolina, and she's asking, what is your favorite animal picture that you've taken? Like, wow, what like from the ones that, I don't know if it is in the ones that you showed us, but like, which one is your favorite one? Like,
so that is actually the photo from a camera that was not in the Wasatch. And so my first year of PhD school, I was studying large carnivores in Turkey, which is basically kind of the gateway to the Middle East, Asia, and Europe all at once. And it has these 3 biodiversity hotspots that go through this country. It's an amazing ecosystem. And in the northeastern part of Turkey, there are giant Eurasian brown bears. They're really large brown bears, and we also have a good population of gray wolf and Eurasian lynx. And my favorite all-time photo, I don't have it on this computer, unfortunately, is when we were out trapping wolves to put GPS collars on them. A lot of what you would do is just drive around and do recon, try to find out where the animals are and all of that stuff. And in that process, we came across a mama bear, so Sow, and her 2 cubs, and they were just walking down the street, or the road, I guess, that we were on, and they came pretty close to our car without really noticing or caring too much that we were there. And so we got some really great photos of them. I wish I could share them. Maybe if I come back next time, I'll have those photos at hand. But that's my all-time favorite photo. Those 3 bears, you just don't really see that often. And so to be able to experience that and have them that close that I could have reached out and touched them. It was something to see.
That seems really cool, really cool. So we're out of time now, so I want to thank you so much, Austin, for participating. That was awesome, like really good.
Oh,
Thank you so
fantastic.
much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And
Thank you.
yeah.
And so for everyone who's watching, tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. and is going to continue with our awesome class. And we also have another question and answer part at 11 a.m. So thank you so much for participating and for your questions. Bye, everyone.